immediately because they want to know what you have to say.
Thank you.
So, no, thank you. So my mother said, well, what is he going to say? I said, I don't know. Let me just wait. What?
Well, give them my regards.
Oh, I will. But they send, because I, shared with them some of your writings and whatnot. My father said, well, when are you going to do this? What? My father's a little impatient. But here we go. We're coming up to. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It is MLK Day. Praise the Lord for that. What a blessing it is. And how ironic it is that the President of the United States will be sworn in on this day. I thought it was always very interesting that this national holiday falls on Inauguration Day every 4 years. And Donald Trump, everybody, the 45th president will be the 47th president by the end of the day. What do you think about that? I want you to reach out to me. Hey, Andre. Hey, Ashley down there in Memphis. Andre here in Chicago. Everybody like and share, like and share, like and share. I want to know what your thoughts are. What are your thoughts about TikTok? Now, I don't know about you, but I've never been this into social media. Kind of going into it, right? So, yes, I did every hour starting about 10 o'clock last night. I started checking to see if TikTok was up. I mean, I was like, what is it going to look like? It's almost like Y2K. What will it look like if all the lights go out, right? And all the lights went out for some of us because guess what? TikTok is a big deal. A lot of people have really developed income streams from TikTok. Ari Paul. I mean, a lot of people have done a whole lot. They've developed audiences. They've developed a rapport with people. I heard a woman say, I'm your TikTok grandma. I hate that I'm going away." I can only think of the sense of purpose that she might derive from her connections with all of these people. So it goes from the personal to the professional. And people have wondered, who, why is this happening? So I want to hear what your thoughts are. We had this gentleman on with us some months ago when we were hoping that it was not going to happen. And it's something you think that TikTok is so big, it's too big for them to yank it out there. But no, no, no. Nope, 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 nope. And he brought to our attention something that some of us started thinking about because now on TikTok and now on Instagram and these different social media spaces, you get your news. Fewer and fewer of us are going to legacy media, if you will, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, NBC, CBS, PBS even. No, we're going to TikTok. It gives it to us. I mean, it's really tight and quick. We go to Instagram. We go to Facebook if Facebook doesn't algorithm us out of existence. We go to different spaces looking for information. And now that portal, well, it was closed last night. It's been reopened, but we don't know for how long. And we don't know what kind of deal will be cut, who will buy it, what will their political proclivities be. We don't know. But I tell you what, when I had this gentleman on my show some time ago, I said, well, perhaps he will tell us kind of what's going on. And he did because he had done some interesting investigative reporting that put a political slant on this. One, quite frankly, that escaped most of us. And, I'm so glad that you're back with us, Ari Paul, brilliant investigative reporter. The Nation magazine, Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, Jacobin magazine. You have written for everybody, and I follow you assiduously because I really trust your reporting and I love your analysis. And I need you to help us with this one because you know how they said the banks were too big to fail, and they were. TikTok is so big. I didn't realize how big it was. And 170 million people there, that's like half the country were like unplugged last night. And now they're continuously plugged back in. Let's back up. What is TikTok and why is it so ubiquitous, omnipresent? What is it? And then we can get to what happened.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me on. Once again, really love to be here. TikTok is a social media network that is owned by ByteDance or BitDance, a Chinese company that is video based. So sort of short videos that it allows people to put up short videos, often comical, sometimes very entertaining. But like you said, people have used it for all sorts of different things. For example, they sort of teach things, advocate for things, but also businesses have started to use it for a variety of outreach. So this has been bubbling up for quite, it had been growing in popularity for quite some time. And this had applied pressure to some of the bigger American-based social media companies that saw it as competition, especially the company formerly known as Facebook, now known as Meta, certainly started to feel the pinch of this new competitor. So it has become very popular, I think, with the young. I'm from a slightly older internet generation that came in with Twitter and Facebook. Younger and younger people are turning more to places like TikTok, and that has really been a big part of its growth. As for where we are right now, I'd say 5 years ago, I began to track this. It was with then President Trump. It was then with Republican Congress people, but also with state lawmakers. People just the right became almost possessed by this anti-China fervor and started to focus it towards TikTok. That TikTok, by virtue of its Chinese ownership, was somehow malicious. That it was playing this malignant role in with Americans. That it was collecting your data. That it was used as spyware. By the way, the accusation that that TikTok might be harvesting user data is nothing unique to any social media network. That is true of any social media network that you might be using. But this rolled toward this gained momentum at the state level, and Congress eventually passed a law that that basically said that if it is not divested from its Chinese ownership, that it will be banned. Congress passed it. President Biden signed it, and the Supreme Court upheld it. Now, Donald Trump, despite having 5 years ago been a part of this rabble against TikTok, is now looking to save it. I mean, like you said, I tuned in early this morning, saw that it was offline, and as I was prepping for this interview, saw that it was back online.
Mm-hmm.
And he's promising to put forth an executive order as early as tomorrow, in the afternoon after he's inaugurated, that will give it time. The deadline for its sale was today, which was why it went offline, but that he would extend it by 90 days to help facilitate its sale and to keep it going.
Do you think, well, who do they want to sell it to? I mean, do we have? Uh, is it just someone who's an American or someone who's just not Chinese? I mean, who do they want? And
So
who is they? Who's regulating this?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say who if there's a real mediation other than Donald Trump himself. I do know that the CEO of TikTok was lobbying hard to save the company, and even is going to attend the inauguration tomorrow to get cozy with with Trump to ensure that the social media app can live. Elon Musk, the owner of Twitter, has expressed interest. Steve Mnuchin, the old Treasury Secretary under during President Trump's first term, has expressed interest. And even just today, Donald Trump said on his own social network, Truth Social, that he would like to see 50% American ownership, that 50% American government ownership, that would essentially make it almost a quasi state investment, a state company, a state operation. It's too early to tell, but it's certainly not outside the realm of possibility that Elon Musk would try to snatch onto it, which of course would raise all sorts of antitrust monopoly concerns, given that he already owns Twitter. These are concerns that people like Liz Warren and the outgoing FTC chair have expressed about all the other social media networks. So throwing TikTok into that mix would certainly be a part of that. But that's kind of the concern now, is that even though Trump's move could help TikTok live, that keep the app going and save a lot of people's, not just entertainment, but people's businesses. TikTok is estimated to be a huge moneymaker in a number of industries, and taking it away would be taking out a big plank of the economy, which is something Trump would probably not want to happen at the very beginning of his second term. But the concern now is who it would go to. If it falls into someone like into the hands of someone like Musk, then will it just become another arm of this monopoly, sort of oligarchic right wing state that is monopolizing social media and tilting it towards the interests of this oligarchy and towards the interests of the far right? So the fact that TikTok might still live is, it's a bit of a breather, but there's still a lot of other concerns about, like you said, who could even take this over. And like you said, who's mediating all this? It's certainly not public. It's a lot of it is smoke and mirrors. So that really hits to kind of the core of what's wrong with this privatization of the internet space. That on the one hand, having 50% ownership by the United States, I mean, on the one hand, it kind of sounds like that could go in the direction of something that Liz Warren has pointed to, that maybe we should treat these things more like public utilities rather than have them in the hands of private profiteers. But I could just see that a mix between the Trump administration and someone like Elon Musk running TikTok would be a bad mix.
Why would Elon Musk be bad for TikTok?
Well, just look at his administration of Twitter. Twitter has seen an enormous exodus, both of users and of advertisers, because of a number of things. It has opened the space for far right, racist, anti-Semitic voices to just proliferate. I mean, now when I log into Twitter, when I barely log into Twitter, I no longer see news. I no longer see people that I wish to follow. I just see this torrent of xenophobic, anti-Semitic, just drivel. And so I just don't want to be on it. It has also, despite Elon Musk's overtures to wanting to preserve free speech, studies have shown that he has fulfilled censorship requests on behalf of a variety of authoritarian governments, including the Indian government, the Indian far right government, which had wanted to censor any criticism of its prime minister. There were other such cases. So just considering how he's run that company, sort of not just taking away its social utility from a lot of people, it has been a bad thing for free speech. So that if he were to take over Twitter, I could just see it being it would have less utility for the public, and certainly the free speech concerns would remain.
If TikTok, for example, became a public utility, I mean, is that something that President-elect Trump is proposing in some way by having the government own it? I'm trying to figure out how that would work.
Yeah, I'm skeptical. I mean, there's been talk in the past by people like I said, like Senator Liz Warren, who have wanted to break up these social. You mentioned before we came on here. Is it like the banks being too big to fail? Have these banks become too should they be broken up? Should we bring that sort of antitrust idea towards these places? And should we really be treating things like our communication networks to be totally privatized? Should we maybe think about going back to something where we have these things being public utilities? I think there are people who think that and who think that earnestly. I don't think Donald Trump is one of them, just knowing who he is and what his political inclinations are. I think it sounds good that, if it had 50% U.S. ownership, it could even be a moneymaker for the U.S. We could use the power of the state to regulate it. I'm showing my partisan colors here, but I just don't think this particular administration would either be interested in that or do it well.
We're talking with Ari Paul, brilliant investigative reporter, writer. I follow him assiduously. I would urge you to do that too. Fairness and accuracy in reporting. The Nation magazine, Jacobin magazine. I mean, my good Jacobin magazine. He just does so much great work. And as we were moving toward this moment that many of us encountered early this morning or late last night, TikTok had been suspended pretty much. It had been stopped. You pointed out that there's also a political issue. Because, many of us, more and more Americans are turning off from legacy media. I'm one of those persons. I didn't even realize. I mean, I turn it on and just keep it going because I have to do it. You have to do it also. But if I want to, I'm interested in these podcasts, right? I want to hear what different people. If I see you somewhere, I want to hear what you've got to say in the long form interview. Um, TikTok, yes, I'm admitting it. Everybody has helped me to become a better cook. It really has. I mean, just in a minute, I'm like, oh, you should do it that way. I mean, no joke, everybody, really. Or maybe you should try these foods. They'll make you healthier. There's just so much that I've gotten from there. But then also, they have also exposed us to, in a minute, literally in a minute, to issues that many Americans have not known about. And you really went to this, well, I would say Ukraine, giving you little snapshots about the history of Ukraine, things that you didn't know. But you went to the Middle East and you said, now really that's the rub. Because we've seen Jonathan Greenblatt from the ADL who really bemoaned the fact that this was not, he said, this is not we're seeing a shift in attitudes in the American public, right? He said, this is not, what did he say, Ari? He said, this is not left and right, this is generational. Something has happened here. Talk to me about this. I mean, do you think that this has been one of the drivers of this breakup of TikTok?
The idea that you spoke about Jonathan Greenblatt from the
Yeah.
Anti-Defamation League about accusing TikTok of spreading pro-Palestine viewpoints in
Hmm.
the wake of the ever since the fighting broke out October 7th of 2023. I think it's certainly a symptom. I think a lot of it is. I think the beginning driver was anti-China hysteria. I think on Greenblatt's part, this has just been. That's just. I think that's a symptom of a lot of this knee-jerk, defense of Israel, no matter what it does, failing to really comprehend why there is so much public anger about what Israel had been doing in Gaza, and that it was looking for a way to say to invalidate all this anger, to say it's not the fact that people who are human rights activists or care about human rights are concerned about this. It wouldn't do them any favors to admit that a great number of Jews, such as myself,
Hmm.
don't have a knee jerk reaction to side with Israel just because it happens to be a Jewish state. That we side with we stick to the side of human rights no matter who it is. And so instead of that, sort of trying to blame it on, well, these ideas must be somehow wrongly injected by a foreign power into the American discourse to somehow disrupt us and to disrupt the U.S. relationship with Israel. I mean, it kind of goes back to the 2016 election, in which a lot of the Democrats, having failed to really understand why Trump had beat Hillary Clinton, to say, well, it wasn't that his rhetoric worked or that Hillary Clinton ran a bad campaign. It must have been some Russian disinfo campaign. Now, there probably was a Russian disinfo campaign. I mean, there's always disinformation campaigns from places like Russia, or the United States, or Israel, or China, or all these countries engage in it. But that's not necessarily why people feel a certain way. But it was a sort of way to say, well, it's not that people like Donald Trump's messages, that somehow a foreign idea was placed into people's minds via social media. That's kind of happening with Greenblatt's response with this thing with accusing Twitter of somehow manipulating U.S. opinion against Israel. I think there is certainly the idea among people who were pushing for this TikTok ban that, well, this could be just one way in which Chinese ownership could be a channel through which these ideas could be disseminated into the American public and thus cause division and dilute American resolve for Israel, or a number of others of its policy, anything else on the American policy agenda. But of course, that's a lot of this is made up. It's not. There's no real evidence to show that the any move of the dial when it comes to uh, opinions about Israel has to do with Chinese ownership of Twitter. I think that is what Greenblatt was saying is part of this hysteria that has led to this type of censorship.
What do you think will be the political blowback? Or will there be any?
Yeah, I mean, it's starting to be interesting. I mean, there was a piece in the New York Post, which is a very conservative
Hmm.
newspaper, in which an op-ed said, they kind of got their digs in at liberals and at social media, but they said, look, even if the Supreme Court says that this ban is constitutional, it doesn't mean it's a good idea. It's terribly unpopular, and it is somewhat censorious, and they're right. One of the architects of the bill, a former Republican congressman by the name of Mike Gallagher, he had an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, another conservative newspaper, in which he was saying it's not a ban, it's just protection of national security, it's protecting our interests, it's not censoring anybody. TikTok could continue to live as long as it's divested from its Chinese ownership. And just reading it made it sound less like a victory lap for Mr. Gallagher and more like he was trying to do some damage control. Because the fact of the matter is, and like we started talking off, if this had gone into effect, if that ban that started, I thought it was this morning, I guess it was last night,
Hmm.
had continued, and Trump decided not to step in. I mean, well, first of all, the economic blowback would be um, would be very bad, and it would put Trump on the wrong foot economically. And I don't think it would bring down the American government, but people do get very, very upset at these types of things. I mean, just a number of years ago in Lebanon, the Lebanese government put a very onerous tax on WhatsApp, the
Yeah.
voice and text app that many Lebanese people rely on, because so many Lebanese people have family in the United States or France or Australia, and so putting this tax on really one of the few apps that allow people to make international voice calls and texts. Helped put. I mean, Lebanon has a whole host of economic problems, but this sort of it lit a match, or it lit a spark, and there were riots going off for a long time after that. So I think there was certainly a fear that if this ban really were to go forward, I think sort of after all the congressional debates and the arguments before the Supreme Court, you sort of saw even the aspects of the political right that wanted this sort of said, oh, wait a second, this could be very, very destructive to the economy and have a huge political, have terrible political consequences for the second Trump administration. I think if they save it, they will save some face and try to say, well, look, Donald Trump was so great. He saved TikTok. It will certainly calm things down. The economic impact of it won't be so bad. But I think the long-term political implication is this. Even if TikTok lives, the Supreme Court president, this law is still on the books, and the Supreme Court has essentially ruled that you can subvert First Amendment protections of free speech to a social media outlet, which could be out of concern for national security and to reduce the influence of a foreign adversary. I mean, that's a terrible precedent going into the second administration, that he has the Supreme Court still on record saying, yes, we can suppress free speech if it's for our national security interests and to fight foreign adversaries. That's a dangerous, dangerous tool that Trump will still have at his disposal, even if we still have TikTok.
We're talking with Ari Paul about the TikTok ban. What do you think about it, everybody? What do you think about it? What will the political blowback be? What do you think is going on? How did you feel when you went to click on the app? I did it just out of curiosity, Ari Paul. And last night I said, wait a minute, let me turn my telephone off and let me reboot this. No, it was off a couple of hours early, and it was confirmed on the news this morning because a lot of people were checking. And my concern, well, I've got many, I've got a layer of concerns, um, because certainly there's, they've had TikTok and Instagram and all of these other outlets have helped they've given us more information, and therefore we're able to draw, I think, more informed conclusions, right? At least on one level about different issues. It's democratized things a bit, because I still don't know who the wizard is behind the curtain, and that I I'm still trying to figure. I would be more comfortable if things were not so secretive. But this anti-China, um, well, this xenophobia, if you will. I mean, this, just everything about China. I mean, we just get, it's Russia, it's China, it's everybody in the world. And I need you to help me with that. What is it that we're afraid of China doing? I mean, because everybody spies on everybody, Ari. Let's be honest. This is not new.
Mhm.
This is what statecraft. I'm sorry to inform you, everybody, but this is kind of how it works. So why? What is it? What is it about China that puts America back on her heels?
So I think it's the fact just that China is the only other major. I wouldn't call it a superpower because it can't compete. It's not necessarily on par with the U.S., but in terms of economic power, military power, and influence abroad, it's really the only other player in town, and it's growing. The fact that it has initiated this Belt and Road Initiative that is setting up sort of a global transport system. It's building ports all over the world. It's building infrastructure in lots of places in the global South as a form of soft power. They're doing it as a way to create economic development in lots of places all over the world, which would in turn have a lot more sympathy towards the government of China from elsewhere along the world. Again, like you said, this is just a thing that governments do. Why wouldn't they? They've been growing their military. They've been increasing their presence in the South China Sea. These are things that the U.S. sees as, okay, look, the U.S. runs the world, and now you're playing like you're gonna come in and take our place. And politicians of both parties have been complaining about the trade deficit with China, that we've lost too many jobs to China, too much manufacturing to China, that they just have too much economic power. And my own personal view of this is that we should have normal relations with a country like this. They are doing what any other country would do in that position. I mean, I think there are certainly criticisms of things that China does in terms of the use of its military against its neighbor, or they have not been involved in any kind of war in any kind of sense, but that it has intimidated its neighbors, especially places like Vietnam and in the Philippines. Those are legit concerns. But again, these are things that are conflicts that any country, including our own, have. So it should be we should be striving to have a much more normal relationship with China and a partnership with China in my estimation. I mean, just a couple of days ago, after Trump had made these threats that we need to take over the Panama Canal because China has taken over the Panama Canal. What he meant was that I think a Hong Kong company, or maybe two Hong Kong companies, I believe it's one, operate ports, civilian ports, at either end of the canal. They don't operate the canal; they just have ports at either end of the canal. But I was very distressed to hear on National Public Radio, which is considered a good a good news service,
Mhm.
interviewing someone from the Heritage, I believe it was the Heritage Foundation or one of the right wing think tanks, saying that China has made incursions into Panama. That a military term that is made as if they're sort of stationing troops in Panama, just about to take over the canal, and and that they're living right under us, and they're about to stage an invasion in a minute. When in fact they were building ports like a great many other companies build ports all over the world. I had also seen in a presentation by the Greek economist Yanis Varoufakis, where someone had in the question and answer section said, "Well, I'm very concerned that China is building ports in Africa and South America, as a way to ingratiate itself with these governments." He said, "What's wrong with that? Countries should have ports. Countries, especially underdeveloped countries, should have ports so that they can have access to import export markets, new materials, have trade, have tourism, all these things. So why not build that infrastructure? And if China's willing to do it, why not?" And like I said earlier, if that makes people in those places like China a little more, that's what soft power is. So I think the U.S. is really having this, hysteria about China. And I think this this ordeal that that we're having with TikTok is just one manifestation of that. The Panama Canal thing is another manifestation of that, and it's really quite disturbing. Not just for the saber rattling between these two nuclear powers with two enormous militaries, but it is also worrying for xenophobia in the U.S. Um, I mean, there's a couple of things. One, a lot of Asian Americans are worried that the more this goes on, the more there could be anti, uh, anti-Chinese racism that
Mhm.
would be manifested towards basically anyone who looks Chinese.
Mhm. Or
So
who
that,
looks Asian,
or who look Asian. I mean,
because we
well,
have because we have that issue.
I mean, just going back a few decades. I mean, the Vincent
Yeah.
Chin incident.
Uh-huh.
When a Chinese man who was mistaken for a Japanese person during all this anti-Japanese sentiment. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about.
Mhm.
These are the worries that people have. Another being just that any kind of sort of McCarthyist fear leads to censorship. That will there be investigations against journalists, towards academics, towards activists, to anyone who's like, well, oh, did you make a trip to China 2 years ago, and who did you meet with? You wrote something that was favorable to the Chinese government? Are you on the Chinese? All these investigations that are that could happen in Congress, and to in order in case I'm sounding paranoid, there's a standing committee in the House to investigate the Communist Party of China. Um, and that's where this TikTok bill came from. So I'm very fearful that the longer this goes on, the more that hostility will be taken out, will be taken out internally towards Americans.
Well, because my father was in. We've been to Africa so many times, and he went and he saw They were about to finish the construction of the African Union headquarters. He said it makes the United Nations look like kindergarten. I said, really? He said, oh, honey, next time I go, you got to see it. Ari, it's 21st century. I remember a report that it's been hard to find it again. When President Trump went into office in 2016, 2017, he reached out to Jimmy Carter, President Carter, and he said, I'm looking at things and I'm trying to figure out why China is so far ahead. I mean, they continue to go from strength to strength, and we are having some struggles. And President Carter's answer to him was, well, we're at war everywhere. They're building. And they're building relationships, Ari, as you just said. I mean, that's the soft power. They say, and I've talked to some Chinese officials, and they said, well, they do this well, or they have this, we do this well, or we have this, and so we exchange. I think America is missing the boat on that, Ari. Or is it the imperialist mindset? I mean, I'm not saying that. I mean, and I'm not calling the Chinese altruists, but I'm not trying to make them the boogeyman either, because I'm like you. I would relate to them. They're too big to get around. Ari, they're half the world. Why would you even try? It seems like we're picking a fight. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. We're picking a fight. I wish we weren't. I mean, I was just talking to someone a couple of days ago that one reason why we have so much nostalgia about the '90s was that it was a period that was after the Cold War and before 9/11. It's like, oh, there was this time of we didn't have a big external enemy. We weren't fearing about Russia. We weren't we weren't prepared for a war against Afghanistan. Um, so I think the world is a better place when America is not picking a big wars to fight. I agree with that, and I also think again China is it's a country, it's a large country like any other, and deserves scrutiny from journalists and researchers and activists, like you said. But the fact of the matter is that taking this hostile approach to them simply because they are advancing economically and militarily and socially is not the approach that we should be taking. I mean, just if you look at how far China has come since the Chinese Revolution,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, I mean, we, I mean, it's an often made point about how, with the exception of the corridor that I live in, and the New York, Boston, Washington corridor, we don't have real rail service in this country.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I used to take the train from Ann Arbor, Michigan to Chicago, and it would always break down, and there'd be
Would you
delays.
stop it?
And,
Get out of here.
and
just out of Detroit. I'm like, okay, what should be 4 hours, it's going to take me 6, 7, 8 hours to get back home.
I mean, and by contrast, that China went almost from 10 years from having almost no real transport,
Yeah.
intercity transport, to having this lavish, beautiful system, that's similar to systems in Japan. Really speaks to a place that is advancing. Why are we not like that? I mean, I think there's plenty of reasons. I mean, we have exited a period where we had a kind of a social contract that we, the kind of world that we came out of World War II, where America was triumphant and prosperous, but it believed in a shared prosperity, that, we had manufacturing and labor unions that, that shared in that prosperity. And having this idea that, Americans could have it all, that they could live in a free society and never be in want, and that we could grow, and that we had things like the Marshall Plan and using soft power, and that so America would be that beacon, that city on the hill. Now I think we're just long past that. I mean, just the fact that we have fires raging in LA that we can't do anything about. We have hurricane victims in Florida and North Carolina that we can't do anything about. Where meanwhile, Donald Trump says we need to take over Greenland and we need to retake the Panama Canal. Is just, I mean, the the analogies between that and the fall of Rome have been made many times, and so I'm not saying anything that's new, but it does feel like the kind of long decline of an empire, that we had reached that state long ago, and we're kind of on this decline, whereas China is sort of coming into its own.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to say it's jealousy, but it's a certain kind of fear that they're taking over in the space that that we would have. I mean, there is like I said earlier, there's a legitimate concern about China's sort of bullying its neighbors like Vietnam and in the Philippines. But for the U.S. to say, no, we should be the leader in the Pacific, I mean, come on. I mean, we take a similar role towards the Caribbean and the Southern Cone in Central America that the Chinese take towards the South China Sea. We have a Monroe Doctrine, they have a Monroe Doctrine.
Mhm.
So it's hypocritical for us to kind of go to China and say, well, you really shouldn't be pushing around your neighbors. I mean, a number of years ago, there was hysteria that, did you hear that China was thinking about building a military base in Africa? Oh, how dare they? I mean, we operate military bases on almost all the continents. That we're, so for us to comment on China spreading its, even in a minute sense, its military presence, I'll say it again. I would urge any administration, even this one, to back away from this, to treat China just like any other country, the way we would treat any other country, and grow together, have a good trade relationship, have a good political relationship, and certainly have a peaceful one.
Well, Ari, I'm wondering if by having the owner of TikTok at the inauguration, if President Trump is making overtures in that direction, and if that would be a good thing. I mean, do you see is that a good thing? And is there a resolution to this?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I read the presence of the CEO going to the inauguration more as he really needed to act quickly to save TikTok, and that Trump being Mr. Dealmaker, who wants these people coming to him, he knew that this would feed Trump's ego, and that Trump would then look for a way to keep it going. I think it's more about that. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, so much of Trump's persona has been wrapped up in I can't even do the impression, the China fighting China. We've got to fight China. But look, I mean, as people have noted, he has won demographics that Democrats did not think he would win, including Asian Americans.
Yeah.
And so if he wants it, if someone is at his ear to say, look, if you want to, maintain your popularity with certain demographics, stop with this vilification. And you don't have to be their best friend, but have normal relations and say, look, we want to profit from from the goods that come from China. I have very low hopes that this will happen, but it I've been wrong before, so maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised. But I would certainly, like I said, I think um, if more and more people just sort of said in opinion polls, we would like to have a more a productive relationship with China, maybe instead of threatening them with tariffs or just any kind of trade war, that we would work together, which is, and it's been done before. So now your question really kind of, you know, what brings it to light is that it often takes a very far right Republican president to do these types of things. Democrats are afraid to do it because they get um, accused of being, soft on communism, soft on China. Richard Nixon, who is in many regards a similar person, although there are key differences between Nixon and Trump. Trump was eager to meet with the USSR and to meet and to open up a relation, with China, and to so if maybe, like I said, if there's someone in Trump's ear saying like you could be the one to do it, maybe that's going on. I have no evidence that is happening, but it's certainly within the realm of the possible.
Yeah, but I mean, look, is it not a bad thing? And maybe I'm being transactional because it's no longer a unipolar world, Ari. I mean, we can't just. I mean, just culturally, the American market is very important to the world. I mean, because who else came up with Michael Jackson? I mean, who else came up with Motown? I mean, American culture is it? It might not. It's not Bollywood in terms of the dollars it generates, sure, but American culture really does drive the world. It really does, and I don't. And that's our soft power. Quincy Jones used to talk about that all the time. I mean, we don't have the hard power that we used to have. I mean, many of us are too obese to join the military. I mean, I mean, and I am not knocking Americans. I'm not knocking our American brothers and sisters. I'm just saying we're not in the same space we were during my grandparents' generation, which is the Second World War. It's a different world.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, even this, to me, Chinese said, I feel like they said, we feel like America's bullying us about TikTok. And then I find out, their parent company, a significant stake is held by the Carlyle Group. Would you please explain to me what is going on, Ari? What is this? What is going on?
Well, I mean, certainly. I mean, I think the French economist Thomas Piketty, Thomas Piketty, he has shown that capital has a tendency to concentrate. So the fact that, if you do enough digging, these CEOs and these groups, all know each other. I mean, capital flows across borders. So just the fact that you can find the Carlyle Group here, is just it's not terribly
surprising.
It's surprising, and I mean, just going back to this rhetoric, this anti-China rhetoric around its economic power. I mean, it's been pointed out before that to say, well, they're stealing our jobs or they're stealing our trade. I mean, it was American companies that wanted this. They wanted the cheap labor. They wanted to offshore. So the idea that we're somehow victims of all this, that American capital is somehow the victim of all this, is just not a fair reading of how all of this works. All of these different parts of capital depend on each other in a global marketplace. So I don't see capital fighting itself, or the rhetoric about all this is divorced from how capital is organizing itself. To the idea of what you were saying about American cultural power, and how it may decline. I mean, I think there's a couple of things to be said. One thing that I'm always struck by whenever I travel abroad is that people are very smart about separating their opinions of the American government and American foreign power from American culture.
Yeah.
People will say, you need to stop supporting Israel. You need to stop bullying other countries. You need to stop invading people, and then tell you about how much they love American music and American movies and American movie stars, and love talking to Americans about American food. And so, look, I think the most people abroad are smart, that we should, not convince ourselves that everyone else in the world is somehow an America hater. They're very smart about, well, America should do X and not this, but we still respect what America does culturally. And I think we should appreciate that. But I think a lot of what's driving some of this sort of nationalist hysteria is a little bit of that loss of what we see as, American cultural power. I mean, now when people watch TV, I mean, they're watching K-dramas, Korean dramas, and listening to what's called K-pop, Korean pop. These things are huge. People love this stuff. They are watching European football. They're following football, or as we say in this country, soccer. They're not just watching NFL football and NBA basketball. They're watching things from all over the world. And so there's this sort of fear that, oh, we've lost our way. I just think of it as the more the merrier. And if we sort of saw it like that, we would be in a much better place.
I think, and I think it is the more the merrier. And I'm wondering if there is a way to get there with this particular crisis. It is a crisis for many people, Ari. Their businesses depend upon this. And you have a lot of small businesses. I don't know the numbers, but I bumped into a lot of very interesting products on TikTok. I bumped into people who are able to monetize these platforms, and it's like it was removed from them overnight. That's not smart. So you gotta. You see, it's breaking that Vivek Ramaswamy is set to leave Doge.
Well, look,
surprised. I'm sorry. It keeps coming across. So I'm like, wait a minute. I got you. So brilliant guy. I'm always, everybody. I'm all about getting someone smarter than me on here to explain things. What do you make of that?
What do I make of Ramaswamy leaving Doge?
Or being, he's not leaving. He's being forced out. Come on.
I don't take Doge very seriously. I mean, it's not a real government entity. It's really, I think, I disregard it as those two individuals, along with Musk, to promote themselves. It's PR. I see it as hype. Again, I can always be proven wrong, but I never really took it very seriously, especially when any real government department has to be created by an act of Congress.
By the government, right?
Yeah. So let's get real about this. But the economic impact that you talked about with TikTok is very real.
I think so. I mean, I'm just looking because I've seen people, they have a little tab. You can shop in my store, my TikTok store. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. People really monetizing this thing. And I've been talking to people of late, and they're like, I really need to work more on TikTok because I have bumped into some really great products and some great creators and some really great craftspeople on TikTok. That door can be shut at any time, which I think that for Americans, that is in a time of economic insecurity, when more and more people are gigging, if you will. I mean, you're not going to keep a job 40 or 50 years. Nobody's doing that anymore. Getting the gold watch, that's over. And the door's been shut. Or it's about to be shut. It could be shut. That's horrible.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's just unsettling. I mean, so where do you see this going? I mean, what do you...
I imagine that within 90, either within 90 days, or they'll extend it. If they don't find a buyer within 90 days, they'll just keep extending it. They will find a way to keep TikTok around. I think for the reasons that you said. I mean, for a lot of businesses, this is like losing the mail. It's like losing your phone. So how are people going to mail you things? How are people going to phone you? This is how people promote their brand and make money. So I think that has been heard, and they will keep it going until they find a real, that they will work to quickly find a transfer of TikTok into some other entity. But like I said at the beginning of the hour, while TikTok would live another day and we wouldn't have that economic crash, as a result of this. The problems of the from the anti-China rhetoric to putting it in the wrong hands, um, like of something like consolidating social media and this kind of oligarchy. It's still a concern. So I think it will keep living, but I think it will leave open the question of how we deal with this consolidation of social media, which, like it or not, is a big part of our lives.
Well, before you go, I mean, how do we not censor? I mean, because it seems, I'm wondering if the information that was coming through before this ban was instituted temporarily, I'm wondering if that same kind of information will be able to get it.
The information that's on TikTok.
Yeah, the information that's on TikTok. I mean, these little news stories. I mean, sometimes they're historical bits, sometimes they're current news stories.
Well, yeah.
That
I mean,
portal been shut?
so that's why at the beginning of this hour, when you said, well, what would happen if Elon Musk took it over? I'd be like, well, I would actually have sincere fear about the algorithm and sincere fear about censorship requests just by looking at how much there's been censorship on Twitter since he has acquired it, and that it's made it. I mean, just looking at some of the numbers, but that from surveys, but also in just anecdotally, I mean, the degree to which both activists and news organizations have divested themselves from Twitter is astonishing.
Mm-hmm.
It's also happening with Facebook, though it's not quite as profound. I mean, just the exodus of media and activists from Twitter has been enormous. And it's also happening on Facebook. And if the trends that cause that on TikTok, or that cause that on Twitter and Facebook also happen on TikTok as a result of whoever takes it over, in the next couple of weeks or months. Yeah, I would certainly have those concerns.
Well, I have them, and you know what? Everybody keep watching, because Ari Paul, every day in the middle of the night, things could change. Every day it's something new. What are you working on before we go? What are you working on now? And
I'm working on this, but believe it or not.
Okay, well, I mean, it's changing like every day. Oh well, we will see. What do you expect from this inauguration? I mean, and the mass deportations very quickly. That I mean that
I knew, I mean, I had heard from friends in Chicago that they had heard that it was reported that, that this would all start in Chicago, which of course is just not a coincidence. Chicago is a big punching bag for the right. They want to hold it up as a kind of an example of what they believe is democratic dysfunction, which of course has a terrible racial overtone to it. And that, that they want to carry this out and really embarrass a place like Chicago, and to also deport a lot of people. Now, by people who really study this stuff, I mean, have said, look, the idea of we're going to deport 12 million people, I mean, do you literally have the horses to do this? And it said, yes, will they bring in the military to do it? And well, will the military go along with it? All these questions are up in the air. I do think that you could see more ICE raids, more militancy, more patrols at the border, things like that. I do think that could happen. I do think people need to be prepared. I don't know what exactly the course of action is going to be. I mean, in the last administration we had, when the Muslim ban went into effect, there was an immediate play to the courts. Courts struck it down. But people are wondering, there's much more court capture now. There are much more pro-Trump judges on these courts than there used to be. So we're going to have to get creative.
You know what? Keep the fight up, everybody, because you know what? It's just going to become more interesting, I think. And Ari Paul, I'm going to continue to follow you. What did you say? You're following this? Well, I'm following you following this, because I need to know what's going on, because I have no idea. Every moment there's something new. There's something new. But I really, I hope that we can find a way of cooperating with the world. It would make things so much easier. I really do. We don't need to fight with everybody. And you know what? Now, I don't know if we even have the lift. That's the thing. It's just, here we go. Ari Paul, everybody, the brilliant Ari Paul. I'm always so glad to have you on this show. And thank you. And my love to your family.
Thank you. And same to yours.
Thank you so much. AM 950 Radio, the Santita Jackson Show. Follow Ari Paul as he follows TikTok, because that's what I'm going to be doing. Back in just a minute. Thank you